What's up, guys? Welcome to K-Train Garage. Today we're going to work on this E46 all-wheel drive wagon. The number one problem we need to address is from 0 to 20, there's a thumping in the rear, and I believe it to be the rear subframe bushing or possibly the rear shocks. And everything else looks fairly worn out. This wagon has 194,000 miles on it and has been in the northeastern climate. What we're going to do, we're going to disconnect the drive shaft and we're going to take all of final drive and the rear down together, because I'm going to do trailing arm bushings, we're going to do all the subframe bushings, we're going to do the differential bushings. So we're just going to bring it down, put all that stuff in, and then put it back up.
Here's the right side. You can see everything. To get the wire out of the way now so that we don't break it later, I've removed the brake wear and ABS pulse sensors and disconnected from the junction box right under the corner here. And now I can just pull them out of the trailing arm and set them aside until we put this back together. Next, I removed the brake caliper and disconnected the brake line from it, because there's no way to get the brake caliper through final drive so I've removed the exhaust and the exhaust insulator between the drive shaft and the exhaust. This gives us access to work on the rear differential. The differential is attached with Torx bolts. I may take off this collar first, gives us better access, because we're going to have to take the nut down on this collar anyway to get the subframe out. So with the brake caliper disconnected, the only thing left is the emergency brake cable. It has a shoulder where it plugs into the trailing arm that is bigger than the holes that it passes through. So if we follow this, it goes into a tube in the front of the subframe bushing, and then it comes out, goes through this passage in the body reinforcement, and then has a similar metal shoulder to meet this part of the tube, which is just part of the body, which is a little more permanent. This is designed so you can readily replace it at the hub, run the new to here, and then just reattach at the handbrake. So now emergency brake cables have been pulled. I called some salvage places. I found this rear subframe. I think I'm going to rebuild this thing with that, because This one, it's mostly surface rust, but It's pretty ugly places like here. This was pretty cheap, so I bought it on the spot. So now I'm going to use a cut press set to push out the bushings in the subframe and put all new ones in. They're marked. There is a special way that they should go in, especially like the rear diff. There's only one way that it's supposed to go in. So make sure you put it in correctly. And if you use these tools, they press it in just far enough so this face is flush, so the rear diff face is flush, but then it doesn't go any further, and then that will be the proper mounting. So once we got all these bushings changed, I'm going to clean this up, and then we're going to start taking parts from the old subframe, put it on here. I got the differential out of the old subframe. Here's what the front and rear bushings look like here. And the frames bushings. If you're reusing the lower support arm, the wishbone, then you'll probably want to do this. I put this big crescent wrench onto the end before I press the old one out. Because if you see the difference in color here, because it's the aluminum housing of the bushing, this is two pieces and there's a gap here, and I don't want to close the gap when I'm pushing the old one out or when I'm pushing the new one in. I want this gap to stay where it's supposed to be. So this fairly large crescent wrench does good to hold on to that and not allow it to collapse. To push the old bushing out, this is my setup. This is a used axle nut that has a flat face so that I can push squarely out. If I only use an impact socket, which is what I did on the other side, then I cause the outer casing to mushroom, and then I couldn't push it any further. You can see this wall's pretty thin, and this gives plenty of flat surface to push. So now we've pushed this flush, we can't push with the axle nut anymore. So by judging it with the new one, this 24mm impact socket is just smaller than the bushing's outer casing. So I'm going to use that to push this out the rest of the way. And because we're now in the arms frame, I don't think it will mushroom. Let's find out. Okay, we're ready to put this back together. I cleaned the loop and put just a little bit of grease and just a little bit on the bushing as well. That way there'll be less corrosion between these dissimilar metals. It also should be a little bit easier to get in there. We'll just push it in with our recycled axle nut and put the bearing right on the nut. It's easier to put in than to take out because this particular bushing sits centered in the loop. So all we have to do is push it in just far enough so that it's balanced, and then we're done. As I get this started here, I'm trying to make sure that it goes in perpendicular. Using this peephole, I'll be able to see and know that it's balanced. That stayed pretty balanced. Here for the rear upper control arm, the spring perch, the bushing side, the kit I have, the pusher bearing is just the right side to push this out. So I'm getting this pushed as far as I can, and then I'll push it the rest of the way with probably a 23 or 24 millimeter socket. But this works very well because this rod is just big enough for the bushing, for it to pass through the bushing, so it stays square, and then this lip stays square, so everything is getting pushed straight on. So that's making this very easy. All right, adding that socket in the middle, I was able to push that out the whole way. Getting ready to do underside repair, dropping the gas tank. The vapor hoses that go up on the right side, they go in here and then they come out here. So if you're going to reuse them, you disconnect these clamps, and then the three hoses that are wrapped together, you can drag them out and you'll be able to pull them back through when reinstalling the tank. I was able to leave all this on there and pull this guy through here. So now hopefully I can reuse all these lines because there's nothing wrong with the gas tank. I decided to take the brake line out from front to back because I couldn't get it apart. The line wrenches were slipping, and then this joint broke
because the line was twisting. These probably had some life left, but because I had to take them out of there to clean the underside, to put the reinforcements in, needed to get them out of there, needed to get the gas tank out of there. So I'm just going to bend up some new ones and replace them. The front under the hood, pretty clean. Got that apart easy with the line wrenches. You got everything out of the rear end, like the gas tank, so that I could start cleaning up the rust around. Like, I'm just going to clean this up, put rust converter on here, but I need to grind this down, have a good surface to weld to put the reinforcement plates at the 4 rear subframe mounting locations. There was a ton of buildup. This is just rubbing it clean with a glove. And this, I brushed it and I started to degrease it. I cleaned up the rear subframe mounts and I mocked up the reinforcing plates in place. So now I've marked their edges. I'm going to take the paint off a little bit past their edges and clean it all up so then we can weld it. I'll get a better bend on these once I get the paint out of the way so that it's a snug fit all the way around. Once I get these done, I'm going to make sure any loose stuff is off, and I'll put a rust converter on the surface rust on the other parts so that hopefully we hit the reset button on corrosion in the rear end here. Got this corner cleaned up. I'm going to wipe it down and tack it in.